Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Talk is Cheap Giants podcast here from NJ.com, the Star Ledger, NJ Advanced Media. Daryl Slater with Bob Brookover talking all things Giants and now all things NFC East here because really the Giants, of course, beat the Texans as expected this weekend in a winnable home game against a team with the worst record in the NFL, but they also had two games go their way. That were probably not expected. Dallas losing in Green Bay, not a stunner, but people probably expected the Cowboys to win that game against the struggling Packers. And then on Monday night here, we're recording this on Tuesday morning. On Monday night, the Eagles, no longer undefeated, losing to the Commanders at home, and even more surprising results. So now the NFC East within reach for the Giants, who still have two games left against the Eagles, two games left against the Commanders, and then the Thanksgiving showdown, uh, one game left there against Dallas in Dallas. And so it's 8-1 Eagles, 7-2 Giants, 6-3 Cowboys, and 5-5 Commanders. That's your NFC East right now. Geez, I mean, this all of a sudden is interesting. It's not just the Giants chasing a playoff spot; it's potentially chasing the NFC East title. But we'll see. I mean, a lot of meat still left on the bone for this Giants team. You look at their chances of winning the division according to the New York Times statistical projection model. It's still just 13%, so they still have a lot of work to do. This is a team that has not won the division since 2011, and it's really been spread around in 10 years since. Washington's got 3 titles, Philly 3, Dallas 4, the Giants 0 since 2011, and maybe this is the year. We shall see, but really going into last night, Bob, you and I both said, probably not going to have to worry about talking about the Eagles losing to the Commanders, but they did. And here we are. Here the Giants are with the division in sight.
It was really, when you look at it, a great weekend for the Giants. As you mentioned, the two biggest division rivals, the Cowboys and Eagles, both lose. They're not in second place in the NFC East. They're in second place in the whole NFL. I mean, there's two teams with 8-1 records, the Vikings and Eagles, and then there's two teams with 7-2 records, the Chiefs and Giants, and that's elite company. You know, but they've got to take advantage by continuing to win. And there's another way to look at what happened over the weekend. While it looks really good for the Giants, it also may have increased the difficulty of remaining schedule, because the Commanders sure looked good last night in beating the Eagles. They controlled the ball for 24 minutes in the first half. The Eagles had the ball for 6 minutes. That's a team they got to still play twice. The Cowboys losing, they don't want to lose many more games, so you got them on Thanksgiving. And the Eagles, we'll see how they respond to this loss. They play the Colts. The unbeaten Jeff Saturday and the Colts this weekend. So when we're talking about the degree of difficulty of the schedule, even the game coming up, Lions isn't a gimme. The Lions have now won 2 in a row, and I think we've talked about here before that they can score some points. So it'll be interesting to see how things go forward. There's a lot of football left to play, but my God, the Giants are right in this thing, and it's fascinating to watch.
It is, and 8 games left in the regular season for this team, the Giants, and 7 wins, which at 7-2 is, you can slice it however you want in terms of why that's remarkable, but this is their most wins since 2016, since they last made the playoffs, and they hadn't won more than 6 since then. And look, I mean, I think the fact that they're in it for the division is notable. I mean, we talk about all the history that the Giants have had and the success recently, but they really have not had a ton of success winning the division. They won it back-to-back years in 89 and 90. Then their only titles since then: 97, 2000, 05, 08, and 11. So that's not a long history of winning the division. Now, obviously, as the Giants know, you can win the wild card or capture a wild card spot and win the Super Bowl. No rule against that. But look, I think ultimately, Brian Dable obviously wants to win as many games as he can here, and whatever that entails. And as you mentioned, Washington is no pushover now. It'll be interesting to see how those games shake out. And the Giants now have a short week coming up because they do play Detroit at home and then go to Dallas on Thanksgiving. But I think as you look at this, it's really become a much more fascinating and dramatic push to the finish here for the Giants. Look, the Eagles just as well could have won this game and then lost their next game. So at some point there could have been some wiggle room here for the Giants, and obviously the focus for the Giants is just keep winning in controlling what they can control. And but in terms of the playoff seeding, last night did not affect that. The Giants moved into second place in the NFC East, and then they remained there after last night because the Cowboys lost on Sunday. The Giants moving up from the 6 seed to the 5 seed in the playoff pecking order. So at this point, the playoff pecking order is the same, even though the Eagles lost. It's Eagles, Vikings, Seattle, Tampa, the Giants, the Cowboys, and the Niners, which means Giants 5 seed, which is the first wild card. They'd be going to Tampa to play the Bucks. But look, the season doesn't end today. So as we look ahead, there's certainly, I think, a couple interesting storylines offensively and defensively. I guess we can just start defensively with something the Giants clearly have to address here down the stretch. No Xavier McKinney. This happened last Monday after we finished recording. He announced he broke his hand in an ATV accident, and very irresponsible of him. I know obviously he wasn't. He said he wasn't being reckless, but look, it's in his contract. He's not supposed to ride an ATV. He didn't know. He allegedly didn't know. He said he didn't know. It wasn't. It was in his contract. And now they're rolling with Dane Belton. So, what's the task here for Wink Martindale in this defense? Coming up against Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, and then they probably Carson Wentz, I would guess.
I wouldn't make that guess.
Maybe not, right?
I
So,
think that Heineke's 3-1. Taylor Heineke's 3-1, and he the Commanders really ran the ball well Monday night, but Heineke's just seems to have something about him that Carson Wentz doesn't. If I'm them, I ride with Taylor Heineke as
sure.
long as that's the hot hand.
Yeah, so the McKinney situation, and they played Dane Belton, the fourth round rookie, every snap against the Texans. What did you make of how he performed? He had his first pick, but in some ways a bit of an uneven performance overall, though.
It was, and you probably should expect that.
Yeah,
As Julian Love said after the game, you're going to make mistakes, and rookies are going to make more than established players, like an established player like McKinney. But it was interesting that they kind of replaced him with Jason Pinnock too. Because he had to go more into the Belton role and as the third safety, and those two guys, Pinnock and Belton, come up with an interception and 1.5 sacks in their first game without McKinney. So even if you're getting beat, at least they're making plays too. And that's kind of been the way this Giants season has gone, with the next man up mentality. It seems to rear its head every week where, somebody does something well for them who you didn't expect to. I mean, that's right from the outset when you think about the two outside pass rushers, Ojulari and Thibodeau being hurt at the start of the season. You fill in with Jihad Ward and O'Shane Zimenez, and those two have become an invaluable part of this team. And that, it started there and it's continued through the first 9 games where, hey, it's a cliche, the next man up mentality, but it's a cliche because it's true. And when it works, I think it creates a chemistry in a team when you have more guys contributing and to success. That creates something special in the locker room.
yeah, for sure. And I think it'll be interesting to see. It'll be a real test for Belton, I should say, going Detroit and then Dallas on a short week. This is something that I'd have to look. I can't imagine that in Iowa in the Big Ten they were doing these short turnaround
Yeah,
Thursday night
they never
games,
do those.
right? So some college teams play on Thursday
Yeah,
night. I don't. The Big Ten does not do that. So
the
this is an
MAC does that. The Big Ten does not do that.
yeah, and the ACC plays some Thursday night games, but
Yeah,
the
they
Big
do.
Ten doesn't. So he's used to the weekly routine, and so I think he's never. Well, I take that back. He was active for the Cowboys game, so he has a little bit of a reference there on Dak Prescott. Dane Belton does, but he's a cerebral kid, and that's something that he only did play 11 snaps in the Dallas game, by the way, Belton. He's a cerebral kid, and his teammates have praised that part of his game, and so that'll be an interesting test for him. how does he handle just the preparation turnaround from a Sunday to a Thursday, with that Thursday game being on the road? It really comes up on you quickly, and this will be the first time he's had to do that, because this is the Giants' only Thursday game of the year, unless I'm completely blanking.
No, that's right. But
So
it's a great point, Darryl, because he his highest point percentage was 79% in his first game against Carolina. He had not. This was the first time he played 100% of the snaps, and I mean that's the hard thing to do in this league. And McKinney had done it 22 straight games where he hadn't missed a snap. Uh, so that along with the length of the season is a big thing for a rookie to adjust to, and that's what he has to do. And if Pinnock's going to continue to play, I mean, I think he had played 60 career snaps in his first 2 years in the NFL. He's going to play more than he ever has. So, yeah, and that's true for an entire team that relies a lot on young players.
you look at you mentioned the snap counts. Belton and he had played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games before this past one. He played every snap against Houston, and in 3 of those 7 he played a lot. 71, 74, and 79% of the snaps in 3 of those games. But other than that, he hadn't played more than 33. So he really had only played like 3 fullish NFL games before this game against Houston. So, let's give him some time here to see how he adjusts. And but that secondary really needs Adoree Jackson and Julian Love to be the pillars, because at the other cornerback spot you're looking at Fabian Moreau, who's been solid this year, but Aaron Robinson is not going to be back this year. He's got a knee injury, almost certainly won't be back. The Giants brought Cordell Flott back. He was active, but he didn't play in the game on Sunday. He is dealing with a calf injury, and so it's a patchwork group back there. I mean, like you mentioned Pinnock that they're playing, Darnay Holmes, and some of these other guys who don't have a ton of experience. So they really need Jackson and Love to be the pillars for that group. Holmes played 59% of the snaps in that game. I believe Nick McLeod got 13%. So like they're playing these kind of no name or not known guys back there. And they don't have a lot of known quantities except for Love and Jackson. And especially with that, that's why the McKinney injury was so brutal. I mean, but they played Davis Mills and they did what they were supposed to against Davis Mills. Jared Goff is actually having a pretty decent year. He's 8th in the NFL in quarterback rating. So how will they handle the Goff Prescott turnaround? Look, I mean, Goff is not. I don't even know. He's not Matt Stafford even. So that'll be a test for the second.
He's coming off a pretty good game against the Bears,
Yeah, yeah.
Let's look at some of their point totals: 35, 36, 24, 45. And they had I don't know what happened against New England and Dallas. They scored 6 combined, but then 27, 15, and 31. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games with 27 points or more. That's a pretty impressive run. And it means the Giants might have to score more than they have all season. They're ninth. The Lions are ninth in the NFL in points scored, but they're also 32nd of 32 teams in points allowed.
They've been awful defensively, and if you look at PFF, even the Lions are 14th in offensive rating, and like pretty much the entire top half of the league has a winning record. If you have if you're a good offense, generally you're going to be pretty good. Then again, the Raiders are 13th in PFF and they're 2-7. So, but I do think that you're right. Look, the Lions 30th in PFF in defense. Houston was 31st. The Giants were able to move the ball for stretches against the Texans. They got a little flat at the later part of the second half, or the first half rather. But this is a game where I think this is a good time to kind of pivot offensively to what the Giants need to do here. And how sustainable is this run-heavy approach? I mean, they threw the ball 17 times against the Texans. They ran it 47, with Saquon Barkley having 35 of those carries. That's the most carries for a Giants player since 1999, when the NFL was basically like a completely different sport than it is now. How sustainable do you think that is? And Lions 30th in PFF, as we said, in terms of run defense, are 25th. So, like, why not keep running the ball, right?
So in the midst of trying to write a story yesterday for this morning. I went down a rabbit hole because I was struggling to say exactly what I wanted to say, and I started looking into a bunch of different things, and I came to the conclusion that the Giants are basically trying to win the same way that the Titans have been winning for 5 years. Um, and it makes sense because the Titans have Derrick Henry. Now, Ryan Tannehill's had some really, really good seasons for them, but they essentially run the football. They're always in the bottom five teams, essentially, at throwing the football, but they're great at protecting the football and controlling the clock and playing good defense. And that's been the Giants' formula. The one thing I found out, figured out at the end was the Giants have been horrible for years at turnover differential. For over the previous 3 seasons, they were like a minus 25. Um, and they hadn't been in the top 10 in turnover differential since 2015, which was Tom Coughlin's last year.
Wow.
And this year they're plus 4 and tied for sixth in the league in that category. So you combine that with being ninth in the league in points allowed and having a running game that, no matter what happens, yes, teams have been able to bottle up Saquon Barkley for a quarter or a half. But at some point during a game, Saquon Barkley is going to get his yards some way, somehow. And, it's a formula for winning that has worked in Tennessee. The other interesting thing I found, because I covered Andy Reid for a long time in Philadelphia, and didn't even realize this when he went to Kansas City, but the Chiefs, and you'd never think this now with Patrick Mahomes, were like in the bottom 6 or 7 for his first 3 or 4 years in pass attempts because they were going with Jamal Charles
Yep.
and who was the quarterback?
Alex Smith.
Alex Smith, yeah, drawing blank there, and Alex Smith, and using that formula. Oh, don't turn the ball over. Give the ball Jamal. Play great defense. It was a winning formula for him. And then Patrick Mahomes came along, and the gloves came off, and it was throw it everywhere, which was Andy Reid in Philadelphia for the most part. But it's a formula that works. It's worked for other teams, and it's obviously worked very well for the Giants so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, the best coaches can tailor their offense. Andy Reid, of course, and offensive-minded coaches like Brian Dable to their players' strengths, and that's what the Giants have done this season, and to their team's strengths. And Saquon Barkley, 35 carries in this game, 34 or 31 rather against the Bears. Those are the top 2 carry totals of his career. He also had 22 against Jacksonville. Let's see, that's tied for 4th in his career. So.
Saquon said it was the most carries they ever had at any level too, which I say, why wasn't that high school coach giving him the ball more?
Exactly right.
I
Well,
Saquon, he gets the ball every play.
right? Seriously. I mean, yeah, what's going on there? I think yeah, look, they're tailoring their offense to what they do well, and that's giving Saquon Barkley the ball a ton. I mean, he has a third, fourth, and fifth most rushing yards of his career. Game wise through 9 games. He had 3 like outstanding games, 164, 152 on Sunday, and then 146. I mean, it's been obviously a remarkably redemptive year for him. I'm actually looking that up right now. He did carry the ball once against Indiana in 2016 at Penn State 33 times. Great memory for him, by the way, on that, to know that because he did have a couple that year in 2016, 31 carries, 33 carries, but he's right about college. I don't have the time to go look at the high school stats now, but yeah, that's their formula. Give the ball to Saquon Barkley, and especially against a team like the Texans that has a putrid run defense, like a historically bad run defense, and they're going to go up against a team in Detroit this week that has a similar area of struggle. And but I guess before we get to Daniel Jones, just kind of finishing up the Saquon Barkley point here, he did have contract negotiations, his camp did, with the Giants during the bye week. No surprise there. Also, no surprise that nothing got done. Also, no surprise that this will be tabled until after the season. His teammates have said this guy deserves to get paid like one of the highest paid running backs in the NFL. That probably means $15-16 million a year, if not more, given the cap inflation. Where do you stand on that situation?
Yeah, it's funny because the Gettleman regime and it was ripped for taking him so high in the draft, and he went second overall that year in 2018, and no running back has been drafted in the top 10 since then. The thinking is it's a foolish way to go because running backs are so get so beat up so fast that it's a tough way to have a franchise player. And Saquon has certainly had his share of injuries. It's going to be interesting because is Saquon Barkley the best back in the NFL right now? I would say yes. Maybe Derrick Henry, but Derrick Henry, just redid his deal and he didn't get what Saquon is probably going to be looking for. I think the key when they do sit down to negotiate an extension will be the number of years and not the annual salary. I think if I was the Giants, I'd say, hey, we're going to give you 17 for 3, or what's the number you need for a single year, and we'll give that number times 3, and go from there. I think that will be the key when the negotiations do resume.
It'll be interesting to see how deep into the contract Joe Schoen is willing to guarantee money, because right now he has a guy in Kenny Golladay who's been a disaster, and we don't need to talk too much about Kenny Golladay. I mean, he dropped the pass, he got benched. It was part of the storyline coming out of this game. I mean, that they won the game, so it's sort of an afterthought. There's not much that can happen there. He's a goner after the season, and I'd be shocked if he was a goner before then because of all the things we talked about cap wise. So, but the point with Kenny Golladay is it's almost a cautionary tale. It's $18 million a year, that contract, and it has guaranteed money into the third year, and that third year being next year, which is why the Giants are only going to free up 6-7 of his 21-4 cap hit for next year, because there's guaranteed money into the third year. You look at some of these deals that have guaranteed money that deep into the contract, and they really have not worked out all that well. The one guy who comes to mind with the Jets, Trumaine Johnson, was a disaster. The cornerback, I mean, worse than Golladay even. And so the Ezekiel Elliott contract has not worked out great either. He's getting $15 million a year. He got $28 million up front. Christian McCaffrey, $16 million a year, $30 up front. He's been hurt. So the reality is, the position is not durable. Barkley's strong start through 9 games and a 7-2 start does not change that reality. And so Joe Schoen needs to kind of look at the totality of the situation and how he's going to approach it in terms of how deep into the deal does he want to give this guy money, right? So I think if you're Joe Schoen, you're probably saying, look, you're not getting significant guaranteed money into the third year, because at that point, Saquon Barkley is going to be 26 when next season starts. So you're talking about the third year, a guy pushing 30 who's had injuries. All that has to factor in. What also has to factor in, and this is kind of a good point to pivot to Daniel Jones here, is how, when we talked about this before, like what will they do with a tag? There is no plural there. They have the option of a transition tag or a franchise tag. Without getting in the weeds, the transition tag is a little cheaper. And the franchise tag, a little more expensive, but more binding. That's the long and the short of it. They can only use one. They have 2 candidates for it in Barkley and Jones. They can use one on one of those guys, and that's it. So it becomes a question there of, like, what do they do? They have to make a decision if they want to keep both. Who gets the immediate contract and who gets the tag, which the tag can be used as a placeholder for a contract to be given out in the summer. So there's just a lot to consider there.
It's a huge thing, and the other thing about when you look at running backs, and as great as Saquon has been, Derrick Henry was a second-round choice. His college teammate came out the year after Miles Sanders with the Eagles. Would he be a downgrade from Saquon? Yes, but not a significant one. I mean, he doesn't get the ball nearly as much as Saquon, but he's got 710 yards this season and is averaging 5 yards per carry. He was a second-round pick. So there are, it's if you're talking about the tag, you can probably go get a running back, and so many teams now try to do it with 2 backs anyway. You can probably go get your feature running back in a later round, whereas trying to get that quarterback, not as easy, although it does happen.
This is a really huge decision for Joe Schoen, because Saquon Barkley is the face of a franchise that, let's be honest, optics matter for the Giants. This is a team where, like, The face of the franchise stuff matters
Oh,
here.
I love Sterling Shepard's quote about these he's got to have an NY on his helmet for
Yeah,
the rest of
I
his
mean,
career.
that's
He's
easy to say for a guy who doesn't have to thread the needle of the salary cap and addressing all these other positions like the interior offensive line that need work. And
always easy for us to spend Mara's money.
true. And to your point about getting a running back later, and like Derrick Henry, I've said this a bunch. In the 18 draft, instead of going Saquon Barkley, and then Will Hernandez in the second round, the Giants could have flipped it. Quentin Nelson, Nick Chubb. And guess what? I mean, Nick Chubb's been the guy has 11 touchdowns this year, 904 rushing yards over the last. He's been outstanding throughout his career. He's got 5,720 rushing yards and 47 touchdowns. Like Nick Chubb has been,
Those guys can be had in the second round for sure.
better than Saquon Barkley. And so,
Yeah.
not to diminish, he was drafted 35th overall. Chubb was just outside the first round. Not to diminish what Saquon Barkley's done, but the reality remains here. Joe Shane has to take a cold, hard look at not just the running back position in Saquon Barkley, but, and we'll pivot here to our pal Daniel Jones. He also has to kind of look at the risk reward of what do we do with Daniel Jones, who is he's been steady but not spectacular this year. But to your point, it was a great point and great stat about the turnovers there. Daniel Jones now this year, 8 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions, a 92.7 quarterback rating. He has lost just 2 fumbles, so 4 total turnovers through 9 games for a guy who had been turnover prone. He has not thrown an interception in 6 straight games without an interception.
That's a career best.
Yeah, and it impressive stretch here, and then, but then he almost has a perfect quarterback rating against the Texans in with a performance that 153 quarterback rating and a performance that doesn't really otherwise look eye popping. He did throw 2 touchdown passes. Granted, Darius Slayton was responsible for one with just running the ball in, but 13 of 17, 197. I mean, can they keep winning with a quarterback who throws the ball 17 times, doesn't turn the ball over, and just, I mean, to some degree manages the game?
He also ran it 5 times for 24
Yeah,
yards.
yeah.
So
He's
we
been
know he
very
can
good.
we
Yeah,
know he can do damage with his legs. And if you don't, it was a flawless game really by Daniel Jones. And if you play a flawless game with a running back who can carry it, he's not going to carry it 35 times every week. But yeah, one of the interesting things too, though, I found in doing that was yes, the Titans and Chiefs won this way. But to get to the next level, which isn't really the Giants' major concern right now, get to the playoffs for the first time in 6 years uh, would be the optimal thing for them right now. But is it? Can you go to the next level playing that way? I think is a bigger question. I think it's sustainable what they're doing right now, especially we talk about this coming week against the Lions. Um, as the schedule goes on, it'll be interesting to see how they do in their rematch with the Cowboys and in their 2 games against the Eagles, and even now the Commanders, because you're talking about pretty good defensive teams that can also put some points on the board. So, they might be forced to play the game a little bit differently against those teams.
I think it's perhaps instructive here to kind of, because Joe Shane has sort of mirrored some of what they did in Buffalo in the rebuild in terms of shedding some big contracts initially and taking the dead money hit in year 1 to be in better cap health in year 2, and he is. But when you look at the quarterback situation of what the Bills did in 17, which is the first year of Brandon Beane, Joe Shane in Buffalo. They had Tyrod Taylor, who's with the Giants now, and they traded him after 17, of course, to the Browns, and they draft Josh Allen, and Taylor in 17 was pretty good. I mean,
Good enough to get them to the playoffs.
right. 89.2 quarterback rating, 14 touchdowns, 4 picks. I mean, that looks a lot like what Daniel Jones is doing this year. And obviously, we know he has the ability to run. And at that point, of course, Taylor was 28. He was later in his career. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. But as we all know, what they did in the 18 draft is they draft Josh Allen, who was a superstar. The notable thing there is that they picked Allen seventh after trading up from 12. The Giants are not going to be seventh. They're not going to be 12th in the draft. So Joe Shane could sit here and say, yeah, there's a quarterback out there next year that I like who is going to take me beyond the level of, say, if Daniel Jones is like a 6.5 or out of 10 of a quarterback. Maybe he sees a guy who's a 9 in that draft. But the Giants aren't going to be within reach of that, most certainly. And so the winning has made it a lot tougher for Joe Shane in some respects, in a lot of respects, as he tries to roster build, right?
Absolutely, it's going to be. He's by having a great first year, he's made his job more difficult for sure. Looking forward. On the other hand, that's and I think we talked about this last week too. Daniel Jones, I think people forget how young he is because he came into the league at such a young age. He's still only 25 years old. He'll be 26 next season, so he's still a young guy just coming into his own. The other thing is, and I don't care who you're talking about, Stroud, Bryce Young, Tevis, any of those guys are at least coming into next season. Are they going to be better than Daniel Jones coming into the league as rookies? Um, Probably not, because this league is about seeing things and learning from the things, learning from your failures. And Jones has certainly proven that he's done that in his fourth season.
I think one possibility could be that Joe Shane could commit to some degree to Daniel Jones with a contract extension. He's not going to get Aaron Rodgers money, but then if Daniel Jones comes out next year and struggles, maybe they hit the reset button the next year. One thing this year has done certainly is given Joe Shane and Brian Dable. I mean, this was supposed to be in some respects a mulligan year, a rebuilding year that you're not going to hold it against them if they lose. But the reality is, if you lose, that's more that puts a bit more pressure on you going into probably year 3, right? Because then you need to do something in year 2. If the Giants this year, if continue to win, that takes a bit of pressure off this GM and head coach. I think it gives them more leeway going forward.
Sure, and the interesting thing you made the Buffalo analogy. They did take a step back in 2018
Yes.
and didn't make the playoffs. So they know what that looks like too. This regime. So
Yeah, the Sean McDermott, Brandon Bean group, 9-7 in year 1, lost in the wild card round in 17, and so they looked at that and said, "We're good, but we need a quarterback to take us to the next level." And that guy they decided was Josh Allen. And then remember, everyone forgets this, or maybe people who pay attention to the NFL a lot don't. In 18, they go 6-10, and Josh Allen was not good. He was not good in 18.
right.
And then things changed. I mean, he was able in 19 to Brian Dable came in 18, but Brian Dable worked with him in 19 and sort of molded him into the player he is now, and not sort of, he did. And so, like you said, it's going to take into the second year of a rookie quarterback. Will the Giants have one next year? We'll see. I think one team that probably will be starting over, I would guess, would be, because you have to consider this too. Who else is in the market for a quarterback? Can the Giants trade up for a quarterback? All that stuff. Do they have the draft ammo to do it? I mean, that just makes it so much tougher. And yes, I think as I just quickly alluded to there while going on a tangent, the Lions will probably be in the mix for a quarterback. If you look at Jared Goff's contract, they can get rid of him fairly easily. So that will be a team that'll be in the mix. Texans, of course. And but for now, the Giants get Jared Goff and the Lions this week at home. How do you, before we wrap up and hit the road here, how do you see this game unfolding?
This could actually, and we don't say this very often, this could actually be a high scoring game. Because I think the Lions can put up points, and the Giants are going to have to put up points. What's their highest point total this year? 27, I guess, against the Packers. And
Good question. Yeah,
in many ways, that's probably
that's
you
right.
know
Yeah.
that's probably was Daniel Jones's best game of the season. He went 21 for 27, where they really put a lot more on him, and he had to bring the team back from a 20-10 halftime deficit.
Yep.
They're gonna need, this might be the first week that they need to score 30 points, but I think they will. I think they can, and I think they will, and I think they'll win 30-28.
I think we kind of looked at these two games coming out of the bye almost like together, right? Winnable home games. The Giants should win them both. And I still feel like they probably should win them both. They definitely should win them both if they want to be a playoff team. The Texans, as we saw on Sunday, are just putrid. They're a disgrace. And just a poorly run organization, a disaster. Their quarterback situation is a mess. So I don't really think it's fair to necessarily group these two teams together in the Texans and the Lions at this point, because of all the things we mentioned. I mean, the Lions are superior in several areas, and even though they are 3-6, they have won back-to-back games. I mean, they won in Chicago last week. They beat the Packers the previous week, which before that they had lost 5 straight games. So you think like total pushover. I don't think you can view them right now as a total pushover. And I think the Giants will lose this game. I could see it going either way. I'll
Really?
pick.
Shocker.
I mean, I think this is more of a challenge for the Giants than that Texans game was. And you're talking about a Giant team that has really lived on the edge all year long. All of their games decided by one possession, except the loss in Seattle. And so you've seen these times where the Giants' flaws can rear their ugly head like they did in Seattle. Now, obviously, the setting here will not be Seattle, and it will not be as challenging, and the opponent won't be as challenging. But I think the Giants are, I don't know if due is the right word, but eventually they're going to have a game here where they spit the bit against a team that they should beat, and I think that'll happen. I'll go 31. I can't remember what score you picked, so maybe this will be the exact one. 31-28 Lions. And I'll write that down because we'll file our picks later
Mine
this.
was 30-28 the
All
other
right.
way.
30
30.
to 28. Okay, so I kind of was spacing there and looking up some Lion stuff as you were talking, but yeah, no, but look, it's not doom and gloom. If the Giants fall to 7-3, it doesn't mean they're out of the playoff race. And you don't, as we said, you don't have to win the division to make a deep run in the playoffs. And so they've bought themselves wiggle room. Not the end of the world if we had said, look, they got to win these two games. I think that was an interesting point that we brought up. But like Dallas losing in Green Bay changes the equation a little bit because you look at how clear the Giants are of the eighth team. Washington's 5-5. The Giants are 7-2. The 8th seed being the first team on the outside looking
Right.
in. So the
Right.
Giants are up 3 in the loss column from
Yep.
being in the playoffs. So they're still securely in, and at 7-3, they'll still be reasonably secure. We'll still have work to do, of course. They'll still have work to do, but anyway, that's how I see things going. So I don't know. We shall see. Anything else to add to that, or?
I think we covered it all.
Yeah, so I appreciate everyone listening, and enjoy the game if you're going this weekend. And we are just a week and a half away from Thanksgiving, which is crazy. So enjoy the game too if you're going to Dallas. We'll probably do a quick one of these next Monday, wrapping up Lions, looking ahead to Dallas. Appreciate everybody listening, and be sure to like, rate, review us on all your favorite podcasting platforms, and we will talk to you all next week.